Hello, and welcome back to our study of A Course in Miracles. I'm Danny Spendlove, and today we are in the last section of Chapter 4, Section 7, Creation and Communication. And I just want to say this section is glorious. The first couple of paragraphs are going to be more about the mechanics of things, but just wait. It gets so glorious. I don't have a better word. So, this is talking about our true creation and our true communication. So, section 7, creation and communication. Paragraph 1. It is clear that while the content of any particular ego illusion does not matter, its correction is more helpful in a specific context. So, all of your ego illusions are equally unreal. So it doesn't really matter what the content of any particular ego illusion is. It's not real. It's not any more real than any other illusion, so it doesn't really matter. But its correction is more helpful in a specific context. Ego illusions are quite specific, although the mind is naturally abstract. And we've talked about this in previous sections about how this abstractness of our minds goes along with this idea of truth, that when you understand any part of truth, you actually understand all of it. And that's an abstract thing. When you start giving specific examples, well, in this case is different than this case, that becomes perception. When you're starting to look at very specific examples, and truth is bigger than that. And I won't pretend like I totally understand that, but it does make sense, and it's, in an abstract way. So part of the mind becomes concrete, however, when it splits. The concrete part believes in the ego because the ego depends on the concrete. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. Paragraph 2. Everything the ego perceives is a separate whole, without the relationships that imply being. And this will make a little more sense later, but kind of like, oh, I have 4 children, and my children are their own little separate whole. They are whole and they are separate from me. So that's how ego perceives everything. The ego is thus against communication, except insofar as it is utilized to establish separateness rather than to abolish it. The communication system of the ego is based on its own thought system, as is everything else it dictates. Its communication is controlled by its need to protect itself, and it will disrupt communication when it experiences threat. So if there's any communication that starts to heal your sense of separation and actually bring you truly closer to your brothers, the ego will try and disrupt that. So maybe that's why we have so many issues with communication in our world, is because the ego doesn't actually want us to see any of our brothers as equal. So as long as our communication maintains our separateness, lets us see other egos as either greater than ours or less than ours, and kind of this comparison of inequality, the ego is all for that. So it will promote any communication that increases that. But anything that threatens the ego, it will disrupt that communication real fast if you allow it. This disruption is a reaction to a specific person or persons. The specificity of the ego's thinking, then, results in spurious generalization, which is really not abstract at all. It merely responds in certain specific ways to everything it perceives as related. So I think what this is referring to is stereotypes, because it says the specificity of the ego's thinking then results in spurious generalization, which is really not abstract at all. So it's not the abstract thinking of the mind where the mind can see everything at once. It's more of a generalization. It says here, it merely responds in certain specific ways to everything it perceives as related. So maybe I think that all men are this way, are masculine domineering brutes, or all women are catty, backbiting divas. Or, we start to, or all people from this culture or country are this way, or all, so it's very much about labeling and kind of putting these generalities that's like, oh, everyone who falls under this umbrella, I respond in a certain way to them because I have labeled them this way. So it's not true abstractness of seeing everything as the same. It's these labels and stereotypes that help the ego respond to people or situations that seem related. Paragraph 3. In contrast, spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true and does not respond at all to anything else. So anything that's true, spirit reacts the exact same way to all things that are true. That's the abstractness, right? There's not like subgroups. Just everything that's true, this is how I react to it, and does not respond at all to anything else. So if it's not true, you just don't get a response. Nor does it make any attempt to establish what is true. It knows that what is true is everything that God created. It is in complete and direct communication with every aspect of creation because it is in complete and direct communication with its creator. This communication is the will of God. Okay, let's just go over that one more time because this is really important to understand moving forward. So your spirit knows that what is true is everything that God has created. If God created it, it's true. And that's the only thing that it reacts to. It doesn't react to anything that is not true. And your spirit is in direct and complete communication with every aspect of creation at all times. Your spirit is always communicating with every aspect of creation because it is in complete and direct communication with its creator. So your spirit is always in communication with God. And because it's always in communication with God, it is also always in communication with everything else that God created. I know it's a little mind-boggling for our tiny finite minds that can't imagine multitasking. That's what it sounds like, right? Trying to have all these conversations at the same time, and your mind thinks that's impossible. But I suspect this kind of communication is a little bit different than speaking. So, this constant communication that our soul is in, that our spirit is in with God and with all the rest of creation, is the will of God. That is what is meant by the will of God, is this constant communication. Constant and direct, complete and direct is how it describes it. Creation and communication are synonymous. Creation and communication are synonymous. They're the same thing. God created every mind by communicating his mind to it, thus establishing it forever as a channel for the reception of his mind and will. So he created us by communicating his mind to us, which means we are eternally basically an antenna, a channel to receive his communication. That is literally how we were made. Since only beings of a like order can truly communicate, his creations naturally communicate with him and like him. This communication is perfectly abstract, since its quality is universal in application and not subject to any judgment, any exception, or any alteration. Again, we cannot change what God made. God created you by this and for this. The mind can distort its function, but it cannot endow itself with functions it was not given. That is why the mind cannot totally lose the ability to communicate, even though it may refuse to utilize it on behalf of being. Okay, and it's going to talk about being here now. Existence as well as being rests on communication. Existence, however, is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. So there's a red flag word right there, right? Existence is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. Sounds like an ego thing. Being is completely without these distinctions. It is a state in which the mind is in communication with everything that is real. To whatever extent you permit this state to be curtailed, you are limiting your sense of your own reality, which becomes total only by recognizing all reality in the glorious context of its real relationship to you. Okay, really quick. So, back in earlier in this chapter, in section 3, paragraph 3, it said that the ego must offer you some sort of reward for maintaining the belief in the separation. All it can offer is a sense of temporary existence. And that's what we were talking about at the beginning of this. Existence is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. So that's what your ego is offering you, this sense of existence, which begins with its own beginning and ends with its own ending, because the ego identifies with the body, right? So when you were born is when it came into existence, and it gives you this sense of existence until you die. Against this sense of temporary existence, spirit offers you the knowledge of permanence and unshakable being. Unshakable being. So now here we are in chapter 4, section 7. And it says being is completely without these distinctions. So how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. Being is a state in which the mind is in communication with everything that is real. That is being. Is just this state of communication with all creation. To whatever extent you permit this state to be curtailed, you are limiting your sense of your own reality, which becomes total only by recognizing all reality in the glorious context of its real relationship to you. You must recognize reality, all of creation, in its glorious relationship to you. This is your reality. Do not desecrate it or recoil from it. It is your real home, your real temple, and your real self. That's a capital S, self. Paragraph 5. God, who encompasses all being, created beings who have everything individually, but who want to share it to increase their joy. We have everything and we want to share all of it to increase our joy. Nothing real can be increased except by sharing. So it sounds like heaven doesn't have like an interest system where you can like put it in the bank, hide it away, and it like slowly builds on its own, and then a few millennia later you come take it out of the bank and like, oh look, it has grown. Nothing real can be increased except by sharing. That is why God created you, was to increase by sharing what he is. Divine abstraction takes joy in sharing. That is what creation means. How, what, and to whom are irrelevant, because real creation gives everything, since it can create only like itself. Remember that in the kingdom there is no difference between having and being, as there is in existence. In the state of being, the mind gives everything always. And if you need a reminder on having and being are the same thing, that is in chapter 4, section 3. Basically, that whole section. Just go review that video. Chapter 4, section 3. Paragraph 6. The Bible repeatedly states that you should praise God. This hardly means that you should tell him how wonderful he is. He has no ego with which to accept such praise, and no perception with which to judge it. But unless you take your part in the creation, his joy is not complete because yours is incomplete. And this he does know. He knows it in his own being and its experience of his son's experience. That's an interesting thought. Like maybe he is experiencing things through us. How would you interpret that line? The constant going out of his love is blocked when his channels are closed, and his channels are us. And he is lonely when the minds he created do not communicate fully with him. Paragraph 7. God has kept your kingdom for you, but he cannot share his joy with you until you know it with your whole mind. Revelation is not enough because it is only communication from God. God does not need revelation returned to him, which would clearly be impossible, but he does want it brought to others. This cannot be done with the actual revelation. Its content cannot be expressed because it is intensely personal to the mind that receives it. So in chapter 1, section 2, paragraph 2, revelation is intensely personal and cannot be meaningfully translated. That is why any attempt to describe it in words is impossible. Revelation induces only experience. So in the paragraph we are in right now, it says, God does not need revelation returned to him, which would clearly be impossible, but he does want it brought to others. This cannot be done with the actual revelation. Its content cannot be expressed, as we read in chapter 1, section 2. But it can, however, be returned by that mind to other minds through the attitudes the knowledge from the revelation brings. So when you have a revelatory experience, you cannot fully, words will not be able to express it to other people. It can't be meaningfully translated into words to share with others. The way that you can share your revelation is through the attitudes the knowledge from the revelation brings. It changes your attitude and how, I'm assuming, how you treat others, how you interact with others. And that's how you share the revelation. That's interesting. Paragraph 8. God is praised whenever any mind learns to be wholly helpful. And this is WHOLLY, wholly helpful. This is impossible without being wholly harmless because the two beliefs must coexist. Because remember, to attack is of the ego. Nothing of God attacks. So to attack is of the ego. So if you are going to be completely or wholly helpful, you also have to be completely harmless. Otherwise, it's attack and it's ego. The truly helpful are invulnerable because they are not protecting their egos, and so nothing can hurt them. Whenever you are being hurt, it's your ego that's being hurt. Once you're not concerned with the ego, nothing can hurt you. You are invulnerable. So you are harmless and invulnerable. You cannot hurt and you cannot be hurt when you finally give up trying to protect your ego. Their helpfulness is their praise of God, and he will return their praise of him because they are like him and they can rejoice together. And this goes back to the previous section, section 6, paragraph 7. To know your brother is to know God. If you are grateful to your brother, you are grateful to God for what he created. God will come to you only as you will give him to your brothers. So now back in chapter 4, section 7, their helpfulness is their praise of God. Because remember, our gratitude is also our gratitude to God. So our helpfulness to our brothers is how we praise God. And he will return their praise of him because they are like him and they can rejoice together. God goes out to them and through them and there is great joy throughout the kingdom. Every mind that is changed adds to this joy with its individual willingness to share it. With its individual willingness to share it. The truly helpful are God's miracle workers, whom I direct until we are all united in the joy of the kingdom. I will direct you to wherever you can be truly helpful, and to whoever can follow my guidance through you. And that is the end, not only of section 7, but of chapter 4 in general, which was the illusions of the ego. So 4 down and 27 chapters to go. But I'm excited to see you next week for chapter 5, which is about healing and wholeness. And please comment, please share any of your thoughts or awarenesses or anything that came to you. And can't wait to see you next time.